Hi, Crimies. I'm your host, MAB, and you're listening to the Coffee and Crime podcast. It's Sunday again. I have no idea how Sunday comes around so quick every week. I hope you had a good weekend and that you're ready for the upcoming week. So I was going to make this one long episode, but it's so long and there's really different parts to the story and it's a lot of information. So I decided to make it a two-part episode. So before I start, please listen to the following disclaimer.
The content delivered through this podcast will at times be graphic in nature and describe criminal conduct which includes but is not limited to violence, sexual assault, and homicide. All suspects described in the podcast are considered innocent until they are found guilty in a court of law. I'm not an expert on any subjects covered, I'm just an interested party. The content will be troubling and upsetting to some people, therefore, viewer or listener discretion is advised.
So this story really hits close to home for me, and this is one that was requested by many of you many times. One of the people who requested it was my sister, so Marilyn, this one is for you. Welcome to episode 14, part 1, Justin Christian Bourque. So I know that when he was served, he chose to be served in English. So for that purpose, I'm going to call him Justin Bourque. So Justin Bourque was born on November 12th of 1989, and he was born the third of 7 children to a religious family. They had an average family home in a nice neighborhood, and he did normal things as normal children do. He mowed lawns and delivered newspapers for money. And like many of us back then, he spent the money he earned on Nintendo games. I can relate. He was homeschooled and he expressed that 95% of the time he didn't like that at all and that he just wished he had a normal life. He said an older friend taught him how to shoot guns when he was about 15, and that's really when he became gun crazy. He also liked heavy metal bands like Metallica, Megadeth, and Guns N' Roses. Quick little side note here. I'm not sure I'd call 2 out of those 3 heavy metal, but that's just personal opinion. Justin also said that around the age of 22, he became a chronic marijuana user. Justin said marijuana helped him cope with the intrusive thoughts that he kept getting, and it also helped him deal with his deep hate for authority. He became quite an expert at using and repairing firearms, and even demonstrated an interest in possibly becoming a gunsmith someday. And I think if he didn't go the path that he chose to go, that could have been honestly a possibility. He had potential. So, to provide a better understanding of what truly happened that day, I'm taking you back to June 4th, 2014. So, this is the night that Justin walked around the northern part of Moncton, New Brunswick, shot 5 RCMP officers, and he ended up killing 3 and wounding 2. This was also Moncton's first shooting since 2010, so about 4 years, give or take. And it was the deadliest tragedy attack on the RCMP since Mayor Thorpe on March 3rd, 2005. And I will definitely cover that in another episode. Everything in this story kind of happens really fast, and it's kind of convoluted because it's kind of messy. But I'll try to break it down and break down the timeline in a chronological way or order as best as I can to try to make sense out of it. So again, very beginning, this story all starts on June 4th, 2014, 6 p.m. This is when Justin and his friend Nathan, they head to an outdoor and ammunition supply store to purchase 3 boxes of ammunition. Justin and his friend had made plans earlier that day to go to a shooting range and shoot together. So this did not come across as weird or unusual at all. 7 p.m. Justin leaves home and he has a plan, a very detailed plan, and no one will be able to stop him or get in his way. He knew that he looked alarming and he hated authority, and he was about to show the world how he was going to handle that. He left his rented home, a trailer at 13 Pioneer, dressed in camouflage, a camouflage headband, firearms strapped crisscross on his back, and a knife strapped to his leg. The crisscross guns were a shotgun and an M14 rifle. So as he casually left the trailer park, he saw regular civilians, and he knows that they saw him walking by as well. So we would later find out that this was kind of his plan all along, because naturally, most people who would see someone looking like that walking around would surely call police, which in turn means that all of his intended targets, or a big part of his intended targets, would all be dispatched to the same area. That being said, not everyone knew who this person was, and some probably thought it was police training or something. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure that I would even know the difference. 7:18 p.m. The first 911 call is placed. So, someone in the area was calling to report an armed man who was walking on Pioneer Avenue. So, this would have been like almost right after Justin left his home dressed and heavily armed. They also shared that this person was heading towards a wooded area. So, immediately after that call was placed, 12 RCMP officers were dispatched to the scene and that general area. Once police got to the scene, they quickly set up a perimeter around the woods and the neighborhood, but because they weren't sure exactly where Justin was hiding, it was kind of difficult to know exactly where to set up the perimeter, and it wasn't a very tight perimeter at all. The first officer to spot Justin was Constable Mathieu Dag. Justin was coming out of the forest where he had been hiding, and Dag saw him as he crossed the street and entered a second wooded area. The wooded area was sort of connected to the backyard of a few houses. So immediately after seeing Justin, Constable Dag called in to the station to report the situation and to give them a description of the person who was walking. But there was a lot of static on the radio, and the message was kind of hard to get across. So not long after this radio call was placed, Constables Fabrice Gévaudan and Rob Nickerson were then dispatched, and they headed toward Justin. And at this point, Justin was walking down Bromfield Court, where another 5 officers were in position and waiting for him to come this way. So for now, their main goal was to make sure that they didn't lose sight of this armored guy, and they were waiting for police dog services to get there. 7:46 p.m. Out of nowhere, as Justin is in someone's backyard, he hears an officer shout, "Hey," and he opens fire. That's when ever so quickly he turned to aim at Gévaudan's direction and fires 3 shots. Gévaudan used his radio to alert the other officers that he had been shot at because luckily all 3 shots had missed the officer. But shortly after he made that radio call, Justin shot him again from approximately 100 feet. And unfortunately, this time he took 2 bullets to the chest and he died almost instantly. Ron McFadden, fire captain, got a call from dispatch. He was alerted that there was an officer down, and at 7:57 p.m., as they're coming to help, they see one officer deceased in his vehicle. They find the officers performing CPR on Gévaudan inside a garage, and they decided to close the garage door in hopes to protect everyone in there and to keep everyone safe while they tried to save a life. Officers actually had to drag Gévaudan to safety inside the garage, and they performed CPR on Gévaudan for 2 hours and 26 minutes. I think they kind of knew it was over, but they were still determined to try to bring him back to life. Their efforts were appreciated, but they were unsuccessful. When paramedics arrived later, they confirmed that what they already knew, and he was already gone. So after shooting the officer to his death, Justin headed into another wooded area. Surprise. And he later emerged onto McCoy Street. So he kept walking until he reached Mailhot Avenue. Side note here, I used to live on Hemmer Jane in a basement apartment in a house. And it's actually a really nice and quiet neighborhood. Like, it's a residential area with really nice houses. And I can just imagine how out of place Justin would have seemed walking through sort of those neighborhoods. So as Justin was still walking through neighborhoods, him and Constable Dave Ross encountered each other. And this was literally only minutes after he had shot and killed Constable Gévaudan. David Ross was driving down the road after being rerouted from the first scene that he was sent to, and he accelerated in Justin's direction as soon as he spotted him. As he was approaching, he drew his pistol, because that's all he had, his service pistol, and he shot twice at Justin through his windshield. But then, as soon as he finished shooting, Justin returned fire with his M14 rifle, which was clearly a much better weapon than a service pistol. He fired a total of 6 shots at Constable Dave Ross, which ended up disabling the vehicle. Out of those 6 shots, Dave took 2 shots to the hand, while another shot entered his left shoulder. Unfortunately, he took a shot to the head, which killed him almost instantly. Constable Eric White had to take cover behind a vehicle when he saw that Justin was aiming at him. And I can't even imagine what crossed all of their minds when they saw the barrel of a gun aimed at them. That's unfathomable for me. A civilian who had been following Justin for a short distance called 911 to report his whereabouts and where he seemed to be heading. 7:54 p.m. Constable Martin Benoit arrives at the intersection of Hildegard and Mailhot. From the ditch, where he had been hiding, Justin opened fire and disabled her vehicle so she couldn't just drive away because she was stuck there. Because Martin had no idea if she was safe or not, she stayed in the vehicle until another officer came to get her. Almost immediately after the shooting, Constable Marie-Darlene Gauguin showed up to the chaos unknowingly. And I say unknowingly because her radio had actually been tuned into a different frequency, so she had no idea what she was driving into. When she got to the scene, she was shot at while still inside her vehicle. She was shot at twice, but with the help of Constable Donnie Robertson, she was brought to a safer area while they waited for help. And earlier, Constable Eric Benoit was shot while he was trying to provide more cover for Martin. However, luckily, these two survived their injuries. So, with everything happening so fast and with everything going on all at the same time, pure chaos, communication got confusing. So, details about casualties varied, locations where shots were fired varied, and details of Justin's location too. Throughout the scenario, it even seemed like no one even really knew who was in charge or who was leading the team, which maybe it's lack of training. I guess in a situation where everything is so chaotic, you just go, 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 and you don't think of anything. But maybe that's why training is so important, so that when these situations do happen, people are more prepared, I guess, or officers are more prepared. Also, service pistols, hello. 8:04 p.m., Constable Douglas Lart responded to the Mailhot Avenue location, and even though he was in plain clothes, he did have body armor on. He had a service pistol and he was carrying a shotgun, as he had done numerous times before, because now we're kind of seeing a pattern. When Justin spotted him, he fired 4 shots from where he was hiding behind trees and he wounded Douglas. So, as quickly as he could, Douglas returned fire with his service pistol and shot 7 shots back. As he was trying to take cover behind a vehicle, he was fatally shot in the neck. The exchange of gunshots and gunfire between Justin and Douglas were actually caught by video on a cell phone camera from a nearby resident and lasted a total of just over a minute. 70 seconds to be precise. That's how quickly it all happened. 8:13 p.m. Justin left the scene where everything happened and then he disappeared in, you guessed it, another wooded area. So a little time had gone by, and the last sighting of Justin was close to Ryan Road and Wheeler Boulevard. A little later on, June 4th, still June 4th, word was getting around that 3 RCMPs were killed and 2 others were in hospital, recovering from their non-life-threatening injuries. Justin was really on a mission because a witness who had encountered Justin was terrified that he was going to kill her, but he casually told her that he wasn't out to kill civilians, just government officials or something like that. So he actually spoke with some civilians and left them alone, never even tried to shoot at them. So clearly they were not the target. Another resident stated that when civilians were getting close to try to help the officers, Justin would just kind of wave to shoo them away. And I saw some of the video footage, which I will not share, and you'll find out why in episode number 2. But I did see some of the video footage, and you can actually see cars and police cruisers with bullet holes and shattered windshields. So it is a real thing. So because of the events, a huge portion of Moncton's North End was placed on lockdown. The search was ongoing, and without knowing where Justin was hiding, the priority was to try to keep everyone as safe as possible, knowing that this guy was heavily armed. So everyone was told to lock their door. They were advised to leave outdoor lights on because evidently it's a lot harder to hide in the light than it is in the dark. City buses and transit were taken off the roads, and they were hoping that this would contribute to an added layer of safety and safety measures. A manhunt for Justin ensued. It started on June 4th. It went through the night on June 5th. The manhunt lasted over 28 hours. So, by day 2 of the manhunt, multiple sightings were still being reported, and around 300 police personnel were involved in the search. So, they still didn't know where this guy was, but they did know that he was heavily armed. So, once pictures of this armed man dressed in camouflage hit the news and media, his family and friends were starting to realize that they knew this guy. Someone in the park, I think it was Justin's neighbor or something, noticed that his door was left wide open, like the door to the trailer. And when the neighbor looked in, the gun cabinet door was also open. And he could tell that, it wasn't full like it normally was. He advised another resident of the trailer park. So at 8:53 p.m., Adam McFarlane, who lived at 55 Pioneer, called police to identify Justin Bourque. He told police that Justin lived at 13 Pioneer and that he had an extensive gun collection. And this would be the first time that police heard that name. 9:40 p.m. Victor Bourque, Justin's dad, called 911 and described himself as being the father of the gunman. On the 911 call, Justin's dad says, quote, "He's got anger issues, and, he's angry at the cops because of certain things, and I thought, oh no. And he owns weapons too. He usually goes hunting with them. I don't know if he'd do that, but I'm just saying, yeah, that's him. That's him." End quote. I think it's also so important to note that he had moved out of his parents' home into a rented home about a year and a half prior to the incident. But he didn't move out willingly, though. He was told by his parents that he had to move out. They had had an argument regarding the purchase of a second gun that he had most recently purchased, and they had also had a serious chat about his inappropriate behavior. So, again, crimies. To recap, now every activity is considered risky in that area. Buses are not running, people are locked in their houses, businesses are all locked, outdoor lights are left on, and now police are asking the public to refrain from sharing information online that could potentially negatively impact the investigation. So, don't share our location, don't share where we think the suspect is, etc. We've all been in those situations. So, police even surrounded an apartment after receiving a tip asking all tenants to evacuate outside so they could actually have access to the inside of the building. They sent a robot camera inside around 3 p.m., but they found no signs of Justin in there, so they just called it a false alarm. After this, though, armored cars were also called in to help, and thermal imaging services were used to try to find Justin. The armored cars carried heavily armed tactical teams, and it's fair to say that this guy kind of caused chaos, to say the least. Finally, June 6th at 12:10 a.m., Justin was located and captured without incident. He was brought into custody, and when they found him, he was actually unarmed. And that's when he reportedly told police, quote, "I'm done," end quote. When he left his house, he really thought that he had everything he needed. However, what he never thought of was water. He never thought he'd come out of the woods to take a drink of water from someone's hose. So, this sums up part 1 of this episode. You know what happened, when, and where, and that he was captured after a crazy manhunt that terrified the city for approximately 28 hours. So, in part 2 next week, I will talk about the victims who lost their lives, some court documents and affidavits, and his charges and sentencing. Please join me for part 2 next Sunday at 11 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time. Don't forget, crime is a waste of time. Until next time, bye, crimies.